And we are live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to the Eat Well, Move Well radio show. Now I'm going to try and get this right. I think I practiced for about 3 weeks. Erick Miyares.
Yeah, very well. Good.
Oh,
nice.
Man, welcome to the show. It's great chatting to you just now. It's been great getting to know you. So you've got a hell of a background, but what we're just chatting about then was a perfect way to start. You know, we obviously got a diverse range of guests and a few in the veterans community. And we were just chatting then about essentially, to wrap yours up in a bow, if one little thing I or a guest can say on a show can help one person, it doesn't have to reach 100,000 people, that makes it worthwhile for me. And you're just saying that's the reason you shared a couple of the shows as well. I think that's why we're trying to pay it forward.
Yeah, I think that's key, Damien. And as we mentioned it, one is good enough, right? And so that's kind of where my, just to jump forward a little bit, that whole philosophy, no, not philosophy, but that whole goal of saving one life, right? And if it's obviously a veteran, law enforcement, so, now even as of recent, some stuff that was going on, even a spouse, right? A spouse of a service member can have a negative turmoil for that veteran, if you would. And so when we do one, that's successful, but in much of what we've done, we know that that's how you build an army, right? That's how you build sort of this guerrilla warfare, where if you train one, and then that one gets 2, and that 2 gets 6, and that 6 gets 8. And I think you may already started to notice that with your channel in its growth. I've noticed that where one person will tell 3 more now goes to 12. And so rather than trying to fight that 5-meter knife fight one person at a time, if you invest a little bit in the range of how you reach people, how you reach them, what you say, and how you leave that little nugget for them to take it to others, I think that's like the being a master at what we're trying to do is, not only put our hearts on the line, but as many of your guests have done, they've acknowledged the power. I mean, you've interviewed and jump forward a little bit. You've interviewed some folks that they're my idols for multiple reasons, not because they were only the best at the best, but to then come openly and put that on the table.
Yeah.
And just like we mentioned, these things will give you nightmares, right? Like once we open these little Pandora's box, it might be an hour conversation that we're going to have. It could be a month that's going to take me or you or whoever listens to it to process it.
And to paint that picture, thank you, Erick. Thank you so much for being so open straight away, which is great. It's a testament to the humility that I would hope we all espouse. But to paint the picture for the listener and the viewer, where you come from a place of veteran suicide prevention, and we're talking about mental health. And yes, you and I, SF guys, we talk about that with SF guys, but it's related to anybody. You nailed it there with the spouse, because, hey, to be fair, they probably get it even harder because they're holding together. Let's go back and introduce you for the listener. Can you roughly tell us about your military background and just what have you done up to now to get you to this space? And then we'll dive in organically into a couple of those things.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So I started and joined the military in Miami, Florida. Actually, it's Hialeah. Hialeah, it's a very Latin, Cuban sort of culture. It's predominantly Cubans in there. And so from there, in 1990, last part of high school, I decided for many reasons I wanted to give back to this country because Open Arms welcomed my family as immigrants. And so I joined the military, right? And I was enamored and wanted to be a Marine. So essentially went into the Marine Corps, did about roughly 6 years. I did infantry as a regular, as a Marine infantry. I came in and did anti-assault men. It's a tow gunner, and then I moved on to as a scout sniper. So I did that for a couple of years, And during that time, obviously, there wasn't much going on. So a lot of what I did in regards to that was obviously training during that period, but did some counter narcotics operations in the United States, which I think for you guys in like Ireland and some of, not necessarily in the US where the military is used, that was impactful, right? So it was just a little time helping the law enforcement, which I have a huge respect for, gave me an insight into that world. And instilled a little bit of, I don't want to say it's PTS, but a little bit of understanding of what it is to be serving kind of front lines in danger, and in particular in the US, right? So I did that. And then I went to what's called Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. Essentially, you're a paratrooper slash pathfinder with a radio, and you're calling back to naval gunfire or artillery to put sort of, gunfire on the enemy. However, at that time, the Marine Corps was, not allowing a lot of movement, and ended up in a time in my life and sort of my first marriage where I ended up going to the Defense Language Institute as a spouse, and I saw the world of the Army, because initially I wanted to go to college, and then obviously serve my time in the military, go to the college, and then I thought I wanted to go to one of the intelligence agency or even the FBI. That was sort of that young kid of what he thought program he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then I came in the Army, and then quickly in the Army, went through language training, went through reclassified from an infantry to military intelligence. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to do military intelligence because, again, that was looking forward into the future. I wanted to do intelligence work. And as you may had heard, my father figure was in the Bay of Pigs, just for to keep it simple. So kind of intelligence work, from what I knew, kind of ran, it's not even my blood, but it ran in sort of the circles of my life. So
Yeah.
that kind of shaped me. And so I went, I was fortunate that I got sort of recruited from the language school into 7th Special Forces Group. So I went in there as a military intelligence professional, a support individual, which is absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I did 2 years there, fortunate to go down to Colombia, Panama. I did a lot of work with the intelligence community in developing capabilities and sort of TTPs. So I kind of, and from the Special Forces Command doing intelligence work, you have a lot of flexibility, just like anywhere in the SF world. So, and then I was hungry to want to be an intel professional, and at that point, I didn't want to go Green Beret, and I didn't want to do anything else. That's kind of why I came into the Army, and so I wanted to kind of pull back, and that'll tie into the future. So I did that for 2 years. In 1999, in May, we got ambushed, and so that was my first hostile engagement down in the border. Saw my first combat, got shot through the leg, and then what happened, I got sent back home. Obviously I got exfilled, and then continued the mission sort of from a support role and a strategic capability, supporting the guys forward. Consequently, at the same time, I knew I had gotten a date to go to selection. So that helped me get out of the house in crutches, get to the command, go down to the basement where I can support the team that was forward, at the same time motivated, right? Like, some of the stuff that you work on, that mental aspect. Okay, I'm gonna push, I gotta walk. That's all I knew, is just, hey, walk. So I did a lot of walking. That helped me heal. And then within, I want to say 6 to 8 months, I went out to selection for my individual unit within the United States Special Operations Command.
Yep.
Did that, and then actually I did one more trip with 7th Special Forces Group, and then started our OTC sort of qualification course, which ran about 9 months to a year, if you would. And then from there, I did one mission that was the standard cookie cutter for my organization at the time. Came back, and September 11 hit and never stopped. So
Wow.
I just recently retired. Probably about, by the time they put me, just a retrospect, I retired October 2020. I got taken off the road maybe 3-4 years prior to that to start doing capability development, force modernization, as sort of a senior enlisted sergeant major there, right? That's kind of what they do, just like some of the other guests you've had.
Yeah.
That kind of wraps it up. I mean, you can pull the strings as you like.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so much. It's interesting. How the hell did I end up a podcast interviewer? I wonder, but I found, because you hear other interviewers. I used to listen to Ben Greenfield for fitness and physiology a lot, and they tend to do the intro and say what the person did, but our world is so you got to get the crayons and the whiteboard out, so
Yeah.
it's so much better there. Okay, brilliant. So what stood out for me the most there is what you and I and every other bloody veteran, I think in the special forces, maybe not even special forces, maybe just in a military mindset do, and they just say something like, "Oh, that was just a thing." You got shot, dude. I mean,
Yeah.
I listened to DJ Shipley the other day with another guy, Sean Ryan, and he was talking about, I took a 45 round in the chest plate like it was
Yeah.
nothing. I'd like to drill down on that, because I would suggest that's where things have really wound back to. Can you just, what's it like to get shot?
It's a pop. It's a pop feeling, and it's the crap, I got benched.
Yeah.
Right. And in that specific scenario, I like to paint the picture, which is, hey, we were literally doing a movement from the capital to, it's called the Putumayo area, which is the border, the Amazon border, if you would, between Colombia and Ecuador, right? So it's this long movement, single road, very monotonous. There's no threat, right? There's no, there was no Al Qaeda, there was no Taliban, there was none of that, right? Like, we knew the most you're going to get is you're going to get. So it just puts you back in the mindset, right?
Yeah.
I was in the lead vehicle providing intelligence support, so that immediate awareness to, I want to say we had like the company commander and the CSM in the lead vehicle. So my role was to observe, identify with certain technology if we were at risk, right?
Yeah.
And then some subsequent secondary collection, if you would, more for strategic, right? Strategic elements. And so that kind of puts you in that mind frame. But however, for me, very fortunately, because being Latin, speaking Spanish, understanding the culture, you perceive, and the guys at 7th Special Forces Group, even some of these guys are blonde hair, blue eyes, probably spoke Spanish better than I did, and definitely had a lot more time in country. I was still I think I was still a young sergeant in the Army, came from the Marine Corps. Now I'm doing something else, right? Which is fine. So in my mind, in our minds, we weren't expecting that, even though it is your responsibility to be in charge. And then as we went through different little towns in these little narrow one-way roads, it's kind of like you see in the movies, right? You see the little town because you got to stop. And we're a big convoy, maybe 15, 20 vehicles, I want to say, with all kinds of gear to provide a foreign internal defense, right? So we're taking everything to the Ecuadorian, I think it's the police or the army, to train them. And so it's a big convoy. It's a big responsibility either way, because there's criminals. So it's probably the criminal mindset is a little bit different than a terrorist hostile mindset, right? And so by the time we went from town to town to town, obviously they were communicating.
Yeah.
Like, the gringos are here. There's a lot of gear. And so that as we went through town to town to town, it became just weirder. There was less people in the town. So now your little hairs in the back of your head start going up. And at that point, the only time I'd have ever experienced the little hairs going up in my head, as I mentioned earlier, when I worked as a scout sniper, supporting the Joint Task Force 6, the law enforcement going after narcotics.
Yeah.
You're going looking for marijuana and meth labs, and you see some weird stuff in the mountains, right, of people protecting their business, right? And so it's kind of a similar feeling as we're going through all these towns. And so we're giving this situational awareness to the command element, going, hey, that last town, that was weird. As we're coming around the bend in the mountain, in the mountain on the road is one-way road. And it's getting a little bit darker. We come around, and essentially right here is a little drawbridge. Well, right there, long story short, is where the local terrorist organization, which between the border, they're predominantly from Colombia, but they also trained in Ecuador, right? And so what they were doing as part of their training and part of their gathering of money, They had stopped the bus and cars, and they were about to kidnap, I think it was the mayor or a politician that was in the bus. They're obviously stealing all the money, right? So we come around, we're in this lead vehicle, it's like a little 4x4 Jeep. As we come around, the back vehicle can't see us. So as soon as we come around, it's not even 25 meters. You can literally, it's like in the movies, you see the bad guy turn around, or the, one of the assailants, he just looks at us, we're like, oh crap, and just starts firing. So again, you're not even thinking this is going to happen, and then it just all starts, right?
Yeah.
Luckily, I was in a team with with really amazing SF guys that ODA was locked in, and as we go to back up the vehicle, now it's the cliff behind.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's where we had to stop. So it's not only them shooting. The car got hit, I think, like 4 or 5 times as we were coming back. The doors open because now we realize, hey, you got to engage. We had done training prior to that, but not to the level that folks did in the GWAT world, right? And so doors open, guys in the front, I'm in the back. I've got all of this extra stuff that I've got to worry about, right? There's some sensitive capabilities that now my mindset is worried about this. And as I open the door, me and the other, we can't fire, we can't. And so it's, go find cover. So as soon as I go secure what I got to secure and get ready to jump over, mind you, it is literally the oil pipelines running along the side of the road. And so as I'm in the air, I just felt like a bee sting, heat just going through the leg. It's just more of a pop, right? So when you ask, what does it feel like? In that instance, I was jumping, but I thought I really nicked something. I thought I hit something that I couldn't see, or it was my gun dangling. It was something until I hit the ground. And then you just kind of feel this just bubbling of adrenaline, if you would, based not only getting shot at, but just something else weird. And as I go feel my leg, the inner thigh, I can feel the moisture. And then I saw that it was blood. And then the first thing is, crap, I'm out of the game, right? Because now I'm in this ditch. In my mind, I'm thinking as an intel Army guy, but then the Marine infantry guy, the sniper, all of this other training kind of reaches this pinnacle ground of like, who are you right now?
Yeah.
Right. And so then the embarrassing part was, hey, I'm shot, or whatever I said. Right. And so that's literally the emotions, because it didn't really hurt. Luckily, very fortunately, it was through and through. But you don't know that till 8 or 9 hours later when you're on a hospital bed and they're able to check you.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing recollection of events. Coming off the back of Lieutenant Colonel Grossman's books, first one is On Killing, which I read a long time ago, and I've forgotten the next one, but it's more towards law enforcement. He talks about human physiology and the most amazing, we're an amazing machine. He talks about when you're in that fight and flight, your eardrums actually close up. So straight up question, did any of you in that vehicle have ear protection on?
No, because we're not in uniform. You're in low, again, we weren't thinking about it. I had internal teams communications in one ear, and then I had some other capabilities in my other ear. But exiting the vehicle, because we weren't planning for this, crap was just everywhere, which was a learning lesson for the rest of my career.
Be tidy, just like the Marines. So you didn't have ear protection on, that which one? All the operators in the vehicle, and the bad guys are 25 meters away. On the range, if we were shooting, we'd be going deaf, right? We'd have ear damage from that sort of thing. But again, you'll see where I'm going. Did anybody have ear damage from the engagement? I
don't know, because I left the command shortly after. I know, I don't have them here now, and you've probably seen, I've got hearing aids. I don't think it was from that, because when I ended up getting and returning some limited fire, it wasn't, like you said, your ears kind of close themselves. There's so much, and plus we didn't have the level of comms, the Peltors and it was literally only one of us had, each vehicle maybe had one radio, right? And so you're really actually yelling maybe 5-10 feet up to the ditch where the vehicle's at.
Yep.
So you're yelling, but then you're also like, well, I shouldn't yell because now I'm going to give them away. So all of these, all of these thoughts are going. But I have had then post that, obviously,
Yep.
in Iraq and Afghanistan and under engagements where I can definitely talk about them. I will say, just in case I forget, that was the start, and I didn't realize. I want to say too, and maybe it's on one of my recent posts, about 2-3 years ago, that I started the other side of my special operations career with PTS, and we weren't aware because I discounted, even as you said, and even going through, in the time in the command, I don't think it ever even really came up, because once you got into the unit, then the rest, didn't quite matter unless it was administrative, and because every trip was its own little book of what you went through. But it's when I had to introspectively admit to myself 20 years, in particular in the unit, and maybe those 3 years in Special Forces group, and put it on the table, what had happened to me. And then you start talking to folks like at Headstrong or the therapist, and the first thing therapists go is like, so I want to know about you and your childhood. And you're like, oh, not again. I don't want to talk about my childhood. But because I needed help, and in transparency, I need to finish that Veterans Administration paperwork to get those benefits and future care to take care of my family. And then it is when a therapist who wasn't from the command, wasn't from the Army, it's like, you do realize you started, you had PTS as of 1999 in May. I was like, it just never correlated because I discounted. To many people, it's a gunshot, it's a Purple Heart, it's a wars, but I left that part of me behind, especially after September 11. And it was a brand new start under different circumstances and at a different level, if you would, even though it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I drilled down on it. That's the way you said it. It wasn't, and again, when you and I chatted just before we started to hit record, which thank God I hit record. I forgot one day, one job, was the way you said it is the same as a lot of other guys have said it. They just say it as a thing and then just move on. I do the same thing when I'm talking to my partner or talking to a psych, and I'm listening to myself going, Jesus, you're really disconnected here, which is the whole point. Back to that pop, and that's why I was drilling down, and I haven't talked to it. I don't normally talk about combat stuff, but I'm intrigued physiology wise. It seems that the ear very quickly closes as the concussion's coming and the shock wave from the gunshot, and then opens again, because you can hear. It seems like your hearing gets superhuman, your eyesight gets superhuman, like Superman, but you're not getting the damage. Almost like flashbangs. How can we get through flashbangs when the normal person's flipping out? So I was just intrigued to hear from that with your battle there, because I think that's likely what happened. And then you can correlate it. You confirmed that, saying years later, when you don't really see that as a full-on stressful event, like your first time getting shot at and wounded, a cop, the first shooting ever, he never even knew he fired his gun 12 times, just the racks, the slides back. Later on, it's only my hypothesis going off old Dave Grossman. I don't think you're in that fight and flight as much. I think you've desensitized yourself, so you're not getting that absolutely split-second physiological response.
Yeah, and there was also an interesting to that. It's because we didn't have, and I can, looking back in time, I remember, very many other, engagements and gunfights and things but we're then spoiled by communications, right? Yes. We're spoiled by the petors. There was a couple of times actually when I got hit in Ramadi in December 2006 by an RPG, and that was, within, meters. It was very similar, but at that point, that shockwave, and I got blasted onto a metal wall or a gate, fell on my knees, but then automatically, I think there's also an aspect of your brain also comes in and says, you are in this scenario, snap out of it, right? And I mean that, many of the guys you've interviewed, for example, Dave Shipley, and I'm just assuming here, he knows what he was doing. He was going in, they're orchestrating, they've already, that's a key word, they've already visualized. So I think when you get to a certain, when I got shot that first time, I had no training at that level to visualize.
Yeah.
I then did, once I came into the program that I was in, we would visualize everything. So you're visualizing chaos, right? That's why a lot of us are very comfortable in chaos, because we're like, okay, these 5 things are going to happen. And when that 6th thing happens, you're like, oh, okay, I'll deal with that. But you've already worried for 5. And so at the point that I was down in the ditch, the hearing, the visual, there's also that little bit of shock. I also, for me in particular, had a certain level of responsibility to protect that convoy. At least it was in my, so it went from, oh crap, I'm shot, I'm okay. And actually that notion of remembering and touching and not feeling bone, right? Then the mind goes, keep on moving, right? Because you've learned to figure out, okay, missing arm, I can keep on, because you visualized it, right? It's the same thing with parachuting or whatever you're doing. You've understood a level of risk, and if it doesn't fall within there, you're going to drive on. And so for me, it was the hearing part was then I have to communicate, because I'm in a ditch and I don't now know what's going on over there, right? I got to figure out how to pop my head back up, not get shot again, right? I don't know what that team is doing. So scenario wise, visualization, responsibility, I think factor into, to your right. It was dark, but I felt that my eyes can see clearer because I can look down and see things. Till the doc came in, and then he starts to touch me, and all of a sudden you become like a little kid, right? When you're sick and your wife comes to you, and then you're like, you're a little kid. It's kind of how I felt. So suddenly that adrenaline just kind of dropped. So hopefully that's kind of what you were trying to pull at.
Look, it really is. It's amazing that everything's 100% until then that doctor came in. Now he's taking responsibility away from you. Now you can get that adrenaline. The adrenaline has dumped before. Now you're getting that parasympathetic drop. For those listening, definitely get into Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. If you're a police officer, it will save your life. I think military is better trained. Ironically, I was talking with Nick from the Mill Gym here in Australia just yesterday. We had a nice little meeting. He's been on the show a few times, SASR Commando, but the people who are most at risk are the cops on the ground. They're the most at risk. They get like an hour's training a year, and they're the ones that are going to do it. So listen to that if you're listening. I want to dive into a little bit more of what you've done, and then so operationally or experientially, and then into what you're doing now, because we're painting a picture of you, the things you're going through, and mindset and so on, and experiences, and then how you're helping other people and what you can assist them with. You talked about you went on one operation prior 9/11, and then after that it didn't stop, and it made me think of the question, because your unit's very different, and it's great that you're saying what you can. Did you get breaks? Like, I mean, let's paint the picture for this SEALs or SAS. They'll go and do a 3-month tour. They'll come back, have their leave, then they'll go into a training role, and then they go into the counter-terrorist role. Different countries, different roles, and then go and rotate back. So there's rotations. Did you get a break, or were you just full on? Because it sounds pretty full on what you're doing.
I would say personally no, and then I can reflect off of that, because my spouse will automatically tell you no as well. Why? And so what tends to happen is we still do teams, rotations. So there's a lot for and so we have a lot of different things going on, a lot of different and I've mentioned it before. So the tactical, operational, and strategic requirements. So these are 3 different levels. Some units in the military will tend to be tactical. Some are more operationally, some are very strategic, or they're the National Mission Force, or they have counterterrorism, or they have training other countries, so on and so forth. And so for at least me, and I like to tend to do that better and not get in trouble, is when I have been in those scenarios where it's probably right behind me, I lived off of a pager. And so my wife lived off of a pager, as I like to reflect that. So, you go through your training, cycle, and then you're essentially on call, which, that takes an impact on your life, because you can't quite say why you can't go very far. You have to live your life from an hour away, can't be any further than an hour away. And I've got to have this stupid bag. And then, and if anything happens and I leave, call Joe or Mike or whomever, who can probably explain. And so it's that same cycle you talked about, right?
Yeah.
And so if it's uneventful, if it wasn't uneventful in early 2000, then you come off of that, which is still pretty intense, right? Between jumping, swimming, languages, all kinds of training, all kinds of joint readiness, right? So I'm going to brag, or I'm going to Virginia Beach, or I'm going somewhere else. We're always interoperability with other folks. And so once you're off of that, in general, what would happen, at least for me, it's okay, you're going to go augment from a tactical mindset to now an operational. So you're going to go somewhere else globally. And that's a whole different mindset. So that's I think the one thing that we have, which at the end, I think we end up being, like nutcases, because folks would try to talk to me and they're like, okay, well, you only did counterterrorism. I'm like, no, we actually did a little bit of this. And then I would come back from a trip or something would get turned off, right? You spin up for a requirement, you train, you prepare, you wait, and then it doesn't go. Then you're going to go, okay, well, you got to go back to tactical. So you may have seen that kind of on my posts. I try to, from a mindset perspective, seed some of my posts where you may see me wearing a uniform, a military uniform, and then I may be wearing something more indigenous, or I may then be wearing, I haven't gotten to them yet, more of the suits. So sometimes then either or I would be put into a liaison position, okay? Because we're, the Beltway or the Pentagon or somewhere else, or you're embedding into an agency in preparation of the next requirement. So we never stopped. Or there's always the training cycles. So there's always selection, there's always the courses. So if you're an idle body with a unique system, if you're an idle body, you're going to get snagged. If you have a unique skill set that they need, then they may grab you to put you in. So you never really stop. And I used to think it was a break, but it's not, because I think it's okay to be doing certain things repetitively for a while and then take a knee. But when you're also never take a knee and you're constantly bouncing everywhere, that's not good for the human psyche, because your brain is, to think militarily, to forget military terms, to forget that way of thinking, and then go do Beltway speak, or now you need to go talk to the Navy, or you need to go talk to someone else. That's like literally grabbing your brain, putting it down, grabbing another one, right? To be that type of person that's required of you. So to your question, no, I never stopped.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Operational needs, and we're the type of people that just keep on going. And I mentioned Nick for that reason. If it's a really interesting, I've done a couple of shows with him. The second one was he acquired a chronic fatigue syndrome, literally because of that. And it's because we're the type of people, you said it with your Marine mindset when you're shot, you just push on. So you just put all that stuff, you put your biology behind you and just crack on. You have another coffee, you do that, because our dedication is to the mission, to the outcome. So it's to our detriment, longevity wise. The reason we made it through selection processes for any unit, that we can put ourselves last. That's the point of it. That's the point of going through those, get into those units, which then I said organic, that literally dovetails perfectly into where are you at now we connected. You saw that I'm helping others or trying to help others. You're doing the same thing. Run me through what you're doing now in that veteran space, and particularly, I wrote these notes down when we were first planning on chatting. Veteran suicide prevention. Talk to us about that. Lay it out.
Okay. Yeah. So I had two guys, just to kind of quick. I had two guys commit suicide. We had two guys commit suicide in 2019, about September timeframe. One took his life, and then these are guys active duty. These are guys that were, for all intents and purposes, good to go on the road and travel and do what they were trying to do. So one guy took his life, and then a month later, the second guy took his life. Right, and so the first one, I took a knee. I was just it's denial. It didn't happen to us. It doesn't happen to us. And in particular for me, when I looked in the mirror, I looked at someone that I helped in their selection process, in their mentoring. Right. And then the second one, I looked at the mirror and go, why is that not you?
Can we pause
it's
there?
The same.
Can we pause that on why is that not you? For the people listening, and this is that crux, that nugget we spoke of. Another interview with a person that's just becoming a friend now, and the SWAT team here is the easiest way to say it. He got out after 15 years, and he literally thinking, oh, transition. Yeah, all these other people had a problem with transition. I know that's not what you're talking about. All these other people had a problem with transition, but it won't happen to me.
Yep.
That person that's listening now, that person that's listening now, we all go through this stuff to some degree. And I'm talking to you, the listener now. Erick's seen two of his guys go down, preventable, and now he's saying, why is that not me? Just take that one nugget and then see where we end up. Thanks for for letting me interject there, Erick.
Absolutely. And so, to put it in perspective, it's probably when we have the greatest fear. I don't care who you are, right? And my personal, and in the 20 years that I spent there, and I received a lot of mentoring, a lot of wall-to-wall counseling, because I was a knucklehead a lot of times, but I learned. And so if there's someone that's with you and they have no fear, walk away from them because they're dangerous, right? We've kind of heard that. You gotta respect it. And I and again, I wasn't an assaulter. That wasn't my forte, but very, very similar dangerous events. And I want to probably equate it to the one way, the military free fall, right? Because the military free fall is one of those that you're sitting in that plane, you're traveling for an hour. For some of us who maybe came from a deployment, wearing a suit, working out of a cush little job, and I travel back that same weekend, I may be gearing back up my mind to go do a military free fall, generally because you don't want to lose pay. And there's some sergeant major that's like, hey, Stippy, that's okay, but you need to go jump or you're going to get us in trouble. And so then you're in that plane, because what you're doing is you're looking to the left and to the right of you, right? This reason we do a lot of what we do is for those people to the left and to the right of us. But we also look to the people to the left and to the right of us as a balance. Okay, Tony's not scared, John's not scared. I trust Tony, I trust John, right? Because sometimes we have that little bit of fear, and we do it all the time. I've literally been going out the back, holding somebody's parachute and going, we're going out. We're going out together. I know these guys have my back. I know we've checked it. And that's what I wanted to try to relate with looking in the mirror and going, well, why did these two guys do that? And what was the stressful breaking point in two people that, for all intents and purposes, were selected, trained, kept, evaluated, no more, no less than what I would be told to go out the door? And am I lying to myself, thinking that everything that I've gone through, I'm invincible? And then the reality check is, God, I've been in the unit at that time 10, 15 years longer, 10 years longer than those guys. It makes you look in that mirror and go, hey, dude, are you lying to yourself? Did that RPG really scare the shit out of you? Did you think the one time you were going to go to jail? Did you think? And it's an eye opener, because I think it's something you and I mentioned earlier, and maybe some of the other guys. We don't talk about this in the team room, right? We should. And so this is sort of why, to your question, we know how to fix a lot of things, guys in special operations, just anybody, right? In general, we know how to fix things, but I've learned I can't bring back someone who's died, someone who took their life, who's a team player. I wasn't allowed to say no in my unit. It was always find the yes, find the solution. And so as in a 12-man team, or in a big mission, or a 4-man team, or as a singleton, my visualization was always yes, fight another day smartly, but get to yes, or report back with pure certainty why the commander needs to change it. And so as it goes back to what I'm doing now, is I can't fix suicide. So TBIs, PTS, depression, alcohol, risky behavior, that all leads to the tip, which is that suicide. So I figured, okay, there's no more compromises. I'm not going to not get promoted to E10. There's no E10. I got my pension. I'm out of the military. I've got the flexibility as a civilian to find employment, take care of my family, and attack a critical problem set, which is stop veteran suicides, because I think at some point it does play into a national security aspect. If we don't know how to take care and stop a military service member from committing suicide, then it's just like not having the right body armor. It's just like not having the right airplanes or the right drones. If we, and just one last little piece is, again, because of that, I don't get to say no. I will say yes and find a solution. Mental health, to me, I'm trying to equate it, and maybe some doctor will correct me, to physical health, right? Like, you're in a team room and I know you're limping on your shoulder. I mean, go see the doc, go do physical therapy. But why can't I tell you and view it in the same perspective that mental health is just like taking care of your knee. It's like taking care of your neck. It's like taking care of your eyes, right? And if that is one way to present and help veterans to say, hey, mental health is just like physical health, that's just like emotional health, that's just like spiritual health, then let's break that stigma and let's avoid that person sitting, and there was one other person that I respect that literally, and he emphasized he was sitting at the corner of the bed with a pistol in his hand. And it was that very similar kind of adrenaline rush that all he can see before he pulled that trigger was, what are my children going to think? And that made him walk backwards from something that we could never fix. And so that is why I take personal responsibility for not seeing the symptoms in my two friends when I walked up and down the hallways. Right, it's not that I'm not going to drown myself in guilt. It's not what I'm saying. But in retrospect, I now know to not stop, not say something, not be vulnerable, smartly on the internet and on my web pages and on these talk shows. If it makes one person, like we talked about, go, hey, if a DJ Shipley, a Pat McNamara, a Thomas, or any of these, Tom Satterley, who operated at these levels, are vulnerable, right? And they're being leaders. I think it's a very respectable thing. Then that one, we save one life, and as we mentioned, then that person can save two, and two hopefully saves four, and four, and then we go back to guerrilla warfare, right? So I'll stop there. Sorry, I'm probably a little bit longer winded, but
you summed it up nicely, and I think that's the first soundbite we'll take out and throw up on the socials. You spoke, so there's a bit to unpack. You spoke about national security, but those two guys, they were literally still serving, still ready to go. So that's not even veteran. That's an OSH, occupational health and safety issue, just like, say, eye protection, ear protection, and so on. But before that, you were saying we don't talk about that in the team room. And again, painting the picture for us, and I'm sure it's the same everywhere. It's just some shitty old couches and a table where you come in and sit your ass down and chill out between kill house shoots or between jumps, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm in an interesting place, Erick, in the fire brigade, 10 years in the fire brigade. And we do talk about this stuff in a different way, maybe not about what exactly is going on in our head, but we talk about the incidents a lot. And because we're living with each other in the firehouse, it's a bit different. And that made me ask the question, is the reason we don't, ask the question, why don't we talk about it in the team room? Why don't we talk about it as operators? Is the answer time? That we don't have time, we're too busy? Maybe because I know I asked that question because in the fire brigade, we have a ton of downtime. I wonder why we don't talk about it in the team room, because we will talk about, oh yeah, my back, and I saw this physio and he gave me needles and I did this and that. You talk about that a lot. Why don't we talk about it, do you think?
So I think, there was something you said earlier, is you at a certain level, you are, for a selection perspective, right? Like you can walk for a long time, you can endure
we put
a lot
ourselves
of pain,
last.
you can deal, so physically, the operator, if you would, however you categorize that, has the mindset not to give up and to work through the pain and understanding a threshold, right? Where someone may go. And so I want to take it to that part. And so when you show that, then what mentally is what allows you to physically endure lack of sleep, almost hypothermia, your fears of jumping, water, right? You've mitigated, you've been able to handle all of that. But now the secret sauce behind you being an operator, if you would, or, is your mind. And you say, man, I was really scared. I thought I was gonna, right?
Yeah.
I just in just simple analysis, I think that's the problem. However, and I haven't been in a team, so I retired maybe a year and a half ago, did more of the leadership kind of role, still go down to the team rooms, which is an interesting thing. I'd like to circle back about team rooms. But as I went back now, so maybe 18 years operationally, I actually mapped as much as I could of my entire career, at least the last 20 years in the unit that I was in, from mental health, physical health, trips, all the way down to every single shot that I got, because I try to analyze it. Again, I had a reason. 2 guys killed themselves. Don't want one more guy to do it.
Yeah.
So
what's the logic behind it? Yeah.
What's the logic? So I tried looking at it in 3-dimensionally and go, and I can go back and tell you the times that, one of my team sergeants or team leaders wanted to fire me, or I wasn't getting along with somebody. Well, because it correlated to something. But if we would have been able to talk about it rather than yell at each other, and then we took mental health like physical health, like, hey man, I saw you at that jump, buddy, and you barely got around to pull your parachute because your back hurts, and whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like something that the rest of the team goes, dude, you're BSing yourself. I know you're taking Motrin, you're getting through it. But now if we can, and I'm hoping they're doing it, if we can say, hey man, you're not getting enough sleep. These are simple. I mean, I know you're not getting it, especially when you go forward, you're not getting enough sleep. You're drinking too much coffee. You are stuttering. You're not remembering the details. And I can tell you cognitively, now that I just broached it, how I knew I was falling apart in 2019. So about 2018, I was trying to finish my second master's because education motivated me, language motivated me. Amongst all this chaos, I visualized something, right? And that always kept me going, even though my wife hated it, because then I always took all the time in the world to study. But when I started to realize and go to certain school that required much more cognitive than it did muscle memory, right? So the hard skills versus the soft skills, and my memory was going down, right? And so I want to say some association to suicides. has been more attributed to traumatic brain injuries than to PTS.
Yeah.
Because what happens with that traumatic brain injuries, of which we all have many, but I can tell you that I have several, that was the decline in my cognitive, which in our game, in our lives, mean if you can't do it human performance wise and you can't think, you're useless. You think you're useless.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I can go to physical therapy for my shoulder. I can go back to doing hard skills. But if my mind, I think, is weak, and everybody thinks that if you have a weak mind, you are useless, then I think this is what's leading people potentially, right, to go, I just need to take my life. Because what kind
how
of
do we don't know how to fix that. We don't have an exercise for it. When we actually do, especially with TBI, wow, that's as a breacher, that's my gig. You're right. I think we think, okay, we're done. But if that was a broken foot or a tendon, that makes sense. It's an engineering issue. It also seems to be an engineering issue within the brain for mental illness.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say this, and I'm going to throw a plug in. PTS, I don't like to say disorder or disease or whatever. Yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder. I stop it there because I have gotten help. I have learned tools, and I feel right now, and again, I get the reality from my son and my spouse. I can tell myself everything I want to tell myself, right, in the service of this country, but in the service of as a husband and a father, I get the reality check from them. And I feel that I am better now than I was around 2005.
Wow.
Because I told you, I mapped all of it. And in 2005 and 6, there was a strategic, fear of life, fear of compromise. And about a year later, then I had the combat TBI, real typical combat, if you would. And so that for me was a down spiral, and I didn't realize it. Nobody realized it. And then again, it was that cognitive, and the cognitive, to your point, was I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't recuperating. I had the will. I had the will to walk a little further, like you guys say, right? Just a little bit further. And then you get motivated by the mission. To you asked me before, my sanity was I never stopped. But when I went into a leadership role and I knew maybe I would get pulled for one more mission, but when you get put in that corner as a senior enlisted guy, now, hey, you better train the next generation. You're going to, work on capabilities. You're like, I'm not operating anymore. What happens to you as a person? You kind of drop that guard, you put that rucksack to the side, and you're like, I think my operator or whatever days are over. I've got to now be a leader. And that's when all that doubt comes in. And as we know, when doubt comes in, hey, my brain's not good. I'm having muscular skeletal. I can't sleep. I'm moody. And for me and for many, two good friends, or someone died, or someone committed suicide. That's when you look in that mirror and you self-assess in a very dark and bad way.
You do, and because you're in your head space the whole time, because that's what we do. We live in our own thoughts. It's tough. It reminded me what you're saying there, cognitive decline and so on. I was finishing Jason Fox's book, so SBS operator, and he was on the TV show SAS Who Dares Wins, a little bit world famous in the operator world, particularly the UK, because on the first series of the show, what they do is they interview the contestants. These are people trying to get through selection, a civilian selection, and they're brought down to their bare bones when we interview them. And he got interviewed, this civilian, and he was talking about how he tried to commit suicide, and that resonated with Foxy because he did the same thing. And he came out on national TV and now international TV saying, yeah, I understand where you're at because I've been there. That's his book. Great book. Battle Scars, I believe. And having him come on the show. But a partner of his, in a way, with the Royal Marines who feed into the into the SBS, he was also talking about a snapshot of his journey. And he'd been a Royal Marine sniper for a long time, operationally and so on. He was due to go on I think a promotion course of some kind. Long story short, he was finding he was getting lost with his navigation, not getting lost, like literally couldn't read the compass. What he'd done all his life.
Yep.
Snipers, for again painting the picture for the listeners, it's in calculations, it's a skill set, it's like an engineering problem. He said he knew he was in the shit when he'd lost his way around his camp. Now, camp in a, if you've ever been near a military camp, it's just a selection of buildings and roads, and he couldn't find his way where he'd been for 15 years. His sergeant major found him lost and put him straight into it. But back in the day, that was okay. Your mind's broken, so you're done, and we're going to get you to see a psych, and then you're going to get out. If we see it as, just as you said, an injury to be fixed, because these guys are now successful people. It's a brilliant place to be. I'm going to let you circle back. You wanted to circle back to the team rooms.
Yeah. So, and actually, it's interesting what you were saying about memory, and if I can kind of expand on that. And so, there were the muscle memory, shooting, certain of those hard skill type stuff, right? Fast roping, whatever. And plus, you're also doing them with a team, right? And so it's easy to say, okay, hey team, we got to go back and do it again because we're slacking off. So you're only as good as the slowest person, like the whole aspect of it. But we also did a lot of stuff at the individual level, right?
Yeah.
So that meant sometimes, or we would meet and go to certain courses. I went to a course that was 8 weeks long, 2 people at a time, every single day, and each day was about 12 to 16 hours.
Jesus.
Just brutal mental, right? And so by the time the second week you're in the course, you learn strategies. I was mentally already deficient in sleep, and and somebody else had said that I was so dysfunctional that I was functional, right? Again, we were operating at high human performance, right? And so when I went through all my evaluations at Walter Reed, just really quick, and had to take this battery of intelligence and tests, are like, you guys are superior. All of you come in here, Navy SEALs, SF, you're all up here.
Yeah.
But what happens is you realize that slight decline in your skills. And so it actually is amplified, right? And so when I went through this 6-week course, it's a lot of memory, a lot of by yourself, a lot of navigation, a lot of loss of sleep, and then it's time. So if you go do an act, you're really doing 5 things at one time, because you can't go back there again, and you only have so many time in the day. So a 1-hour activity, you better do it. You better do it right.
Yeah.
But I was I just was failing at the ability to remember details and other attributes. And I took that with me and said, hey, I'm having problems, but then I just associated it to sleep. And associated it to, unfortunately, to age. I'm like, okay, I'm getting old, and this is what happens when you get old. And so there was then a time where, and then for me, languages were very important. The ability, of course, to absorb a lot of languages, absorb cultures. And I was just, and even Spanish, it's a native language. When I was taking the test, I'm failing to my level, the Spanish. I'm like, this is not right. Like this, there's something. If I can't think, I'll normally think you're gonna, in English, Spanish, or Portuguese. Just because of my family, and so I could not formulate and come up with words in either 3 of those languages. And I'm like, I'm broken. There's something wrong. So I started to lose memory. And what's starting to also happen is I'm walking down the hallway, and there'd be new classes of guys that were coming in, generations that were coming in, and I'm like, I met that guy, but I forgot the name. And in our world, it's memory. It's remembering those details very passively, coming back and reporting it, right? That's kind of more that reconnaissance side of the house. Is how do I remember all of this 4 or 5 hours later, be able to articulate what I saw? And I would meet people and I would forget their names.
Wow.
So I got to a point with then external to the organization, as I now have more idle time as a leader. I'm not deploying, I'm no longer operating. And I'm hearing about this helicopter crash with all of these folks. 2 dudes got blown up. And then I'm really now going, I know those people, I've worked with them. It's starting to sink in, right? Because we never stopped and thought about it, because we didn't have a lot of deaths, but those people within our same peer groups or those same folks that we were working with were dying. However, it's almost like watching TV and going, okay, I got to put that away, right? And so when I'm walking down the hallways and I'm seeing people and they're new guys, I'm like, hey, I can't remember who they are, their names. I don't want to know them, because I don't want to hurt if something happens to this person.
Wow.
That's kind of why I referenced that back. So
wow.
as that was building, and then I'm getting ready to retire, I'm like, I don't want to, for operational reasons, I'd rather just not know that guy. I don't want to know his family. I don't want to know his children. I don't know where he's going to want to go, right? Because we're always mitigating risk in sort of our in our line.
Yep.
And so then the guys kill themselves, and then you're just like, oh God, right? It's like trying to get out of a round room.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it felt for a long time till I asked for help.
Wow, that's another jumping off point there. In particular, when you're talking about sleep and essentially you're summing up biology, because then you throw in coffee, which is a stimulant. So many of the coaches that I've interviewed, and when I say coach, it's such a understatement. The one I enjoyed the most as a coach, there's another one I enjoy as a professor, Christian Thibodeau, Olympic athlete, Olympic coach. So pretty high skill set. And him and I both agree, and then a lot of others do, biology creates psychology. So if we give an example of that, we know that when you get your full night's sleep, when you don't get your full night's sleep, you can't convert short-term memory of today into long-term memory tomorrow. So you can't remember that guy's name. That's not your psychology. And I'm saying to you, Eric, because you're the one that brought it up, but people are listening, it's not your psychology. It's not, oh, I'm not as good. Oh, I missed that. If you had sleep, you would have filed that into the hard drive of long-term memory. One example, and then of course 5 hours or less. And I think Hitler's people did it. The longest they sleep deprived someone was 11 days, and their eyeballs bled out and they died. They become psychotic after 5 days. That's why we do a resistance to interrogation, and so we give them sleep deprivation. It creates your psychology. And we're talking now about solutions, or we lean towards that sort of part of the show. Sleep, you got to get that 7.5 to 9 hours sleep a night. And when you're in the weeds, and we've all been there, I've been there, you think you're okay. No, I'm a sleep coach. I can teach someone about it. But when I get my sleep every day right for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, you become a different person. And it's like pushing a car. It's interesting. I've never thought about this. There's a quote I put out there for the fat loss people. One salad doesn't make you healthy, just like one Big Mac won't make you fat. It's like pushing a car. Very hard to start with, but eventually it's easy. So get the sleep right. Do the work. Don't use that alcohol to get to sleep. We self-medicate, which is appropriate sometimes, but not when it goes on, as John McPhee said, years and years of drinking alcohol and eating McDonald's. Let's get that biology right so the psychology can come there. And, if we talked about Nick Caldwell, literally on 5-10 coffees, and suddenly he's got chronic fatigue. His body literally rebelled, and then chronic fatigue would lead to depression. Chronic fatigue would lead to massive feelings of poor self-worth, and that could end up with a muzzle in your mouth. Let's get that. We can control that, and we are in charge of what you're going to do the next time you eat. That's one step forward. We only think one step at a time, and when you're doing selection, and we're trying to get to the end. That night's sleep, that's just one night. Just get that one step right, and then try and get the next one. Forget about the next 2 months. I'm passionate about this biology side, helping the psychology, and then of course going and getting that help that we've all had, talking to great people. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because we were just go and go and go, and you were clearly on that course, just going.
Oh yeah, I mean, and if I could, so right now, sleep is the most important thing in my life, and I want to say my family's life. And so, what do I mean by that? And so, one of the things that I'm trying to figure out a way to, at least in the active duty, and in particular, hopefully in the special operations, with some of the work that I'm doing with the military special operations family collaborative, right? So it's this nonprofit group that brought me in, and they focus, and I think there's a lot of collaboration that you can help us with, where they're research based. They want to educate, and then they want to connect. It isn't about retreats or any of these other things. It's just about pure science, pure facts, and then
Support.
because it comes from the special operations, it's small, but it's like the special operations community taking it hopefully to special operations leadership. And in my hopes is that we can get this to the Veterans Administration, we can get this to the conventional military, and hopefully we can get this to Congress, right? At least over here. And so a piece of that was, why is it that when I get ready to retire, I finally get issued a CPAP machine and hearing aids? Like
I think
I
you
didn't
should have had the CPAP
suddenly,
machine 10 years ago.
and so I can, yes. And as I looked at that, because it was, as you're getting ready to retire, right? And if you look at my career and my wife, it was just another part of it, is there has to be a balance between the veteran, the military service member, and that family is always forgotten.
Yep.
And I came from a very unique organization with very high-end capabilities, and the family, for intensive purposes, are not really factored in. And so we sleep better, we think better, we act better when we're deployed. We fall apart. Many of your guests and those that came from those same units have said the worst time, again, to my end state, the guys killing themselves, isn't when they're forward, it's when they have that downtime, when they're not sleeping, because it's not mission driven, it's not purposeful, it's not the adrenaline. You don't have your teammates around you, right? This is your spouse, and you may get in an argument, so you go sleep in the guest room. Now you're up, your mind is going and going and going, and so, or you don't have that CPAP machine, nor did you get that gabapentin, which helps, which all of us have, the muscular skeletal pain, which I described it at Walter Reed. I'm like, hey, I have this violent dance of sleeping. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, here's what my night looks like when I'm home. I can't fall asleep because I'm still processing, all of these years of military till I learned, right? So now it's different because I learned the tools, but before I didn't know what I was doing. My mind was getting the better of me, right? And then you have a couple of drinks, and so you think that's how you can fall asleep. You're really just numbing yourself. So I finally fall asleep. Then the sleep apnea kicks in 2 hours into it, 3 hours. So I haven't gone into that proper cycle. Now I wake up, I'm tired, and now I start to feel the muscular skeletal pain, right? And so now I'm tossing and turning violently for 3 hours. So then most of us, if we learn to reset, we operated or worked at night and we slept in the day, right? So our schedules have always been completely the opposite. I got used to, for the longest period, I mentally would fall asleep when I saw the sun come up, right?
Wow.
So that's when,
wow.
Right? Because you think about it, you talk to all of those other guys, when did we sleep? Well, we ate dinner for breakfast, we slept during the day, we got up at night, we went to all work, because that's what the task forces do in this sort of, GWAT world. And then when you go back to your mental training or your muscle memory, right? At our worst uncomfortable times as soldiers, it is then, I remember misery. I have comfort in misery. I feel more comfortable. I felt more comfortable in chaos and in misery than in the comfort of my $3,000 bed, right? And so the only thing, once you get into that survival mode of literally trying to fall asleep, It was that sun coming up and something in my body going, okay, Eric, you can sleep now. And then I would sleep. Well, that's just disastrous, because now I can't wake up to go to work. I am in a bad mood. It's just a really violent cycle till I went to finally start to retire. And they're like, long story short, you have sleep apnea, and you know, this can kill you. Oh, and by the way, you have very, very bad hypervigilance. Your eyes won't stop. So we put the mask on you, you're getting that oxygen, the CPAP machine is helping you, but your eyes continue to go open and close, and because they filmed my eyes. And so they're like, a lot of you guys have sleep apnea, muscular skeletal pain problem, right? So once you wake up, then all of these problems are hurting you. And then most of you have hypervigilance. So there's this trifecta, if you would, of this reason why we can't sleep. And that's just not even worrying about life in itself. My point to all of this from the beginning was, why are we waiting for someone to retire? Why aren't we doing some of this preventive maintenance, right? And even hearing, right? I would submit that hearing is much more important than my vision. Because if you get eye strain, this is just Erick's, self-reflecting on what I've learned and what I've experienced. I can close my eyes when my eyes are strained, or I'm getting those pain, right, from your eyes.
Right.
What you can't turn off is your hearing. As you know, your hearing, most of us have the frequency ranges blown out of our ears from explosions, non-standard aircrafts, is that frequency range. That frequency range, how it explains to me, in the English language equals certain words and letters.
Yeah.
So most of us we hear well, but we're missing parts of the sentence. And so this is why a lot of us turn our ears when they're talking, right? And your spouse is like, do you not understand me? Right? Well, it was a simple solution of a hearing aid, which then also helps with tinnitus, which then also helps you to fall asleep at night. Again, the point is, why wait till we retire to give us then eyeglasses, hearing aids, CPAP machines, and all of these tools? Why don't we put some of this preventive maintenance ahead of time? Just as we teach guys to shoot, we teach them how to do human performance and all of these other tools. Maybe that will help with some of the mental health aspect of, hey, I'm not really that broken, Anyway.
I think we'll get there. I mean, I see things evolving. I mean, the fact that I was astounded when I was chatting to, I think it was Chris Moyer, a Dutch Moyer as he's known. When did we get a chance to just talk like this? And other people here, former veterans, former operators and current veterans, talk about this stuff. I think we're getting there in ways. I mean, some things I can tick off. Box breathing, the Navy SEALs book box breathing, and that was just for their select. I know it's not called that, but for their selection process. But then the boys are doing it on the helos. Jason Fox and Ollie Ollerton, again, SPS guys, we're talking about. They're all going to do a hit on a compound, and they're all doing box breathing as they should to calm that down. I know SASR, the Australian SAS here, have sleep pods, much like those. I often forget the name. There's immersion chambers you get where you lie in like a bath, but these ones are different. These are just for sleep, and literally you can say, "Hey, man, I'm just going in there," and no one's going to question you because you need a nap. They're going to get their human performance cells in the units are super important. But the other side, as I'm thinking, as I'm talking, is it'll all get blown out the window when there's operation. I think awareness is the first stage. And as we're all coming out of it and being aware of it, I think that's really helpful.
I think, and if I may, I think there's, I'm sorry to cut you off. I think it's just also, a little bit of, I mean, we're smart organizations to be able to go, hey, and the other one was tracking these operators or these, anybody, any soldier, as if it was similar to a $1 million platform.
Yes.
Right. So the commander, and this is just me, a commander of a naval ship, of an artillery that $1 million capability better be serviceable, right?
Yes.
Because that's a capability. So how about we kind of take a similar approach to where, you know, boats, aircrafts, anything that runs, already the operations officer and the commander knows a year out that that device needs to get preventive maintenance. It's going to need to change the oil in 6 months. It's going to need to change the ball bearings. Well, how about if we looked at each individual? I mean, it takes a little bit of time, operator, and some commands do it as if it were $1 million investment, right? And just,
Yeah.
hey, you're different and I'm different. Yeah, we're all kind of basic, same DNA and same left and right. But let's just, from early on, when you get a new operator or a new SEAL, let's track that person as if they were that type of capability, right? I think they're doing it, but really now holistically. Hey, how are they mentally? How are they physically? How are they at home? At the end, you're bringing, and again, and some of these guys have been having nonstop GWAT. There hasn't been a reset. Even young guys graduating from their Q courses, but they're going into a culture with old dudes and old permeating ways. As you know, the hardest thing to ever change in an organization, it's its culture. It can take a decade. That's why I meant from a national security perspective, how, SOF is very flexible, but spending money, right? That's how we used to know when something's important at the higher levels as you get into rank, is how much money was actually committed to something, right? So the guys in leadership know, okay, the money is behind that. That's serious versus just talk. So if we really emphasized about the longevity and what does that individual need, and then it's just common in the team room. And man, I got to go to the sleep pod, or I got to go to reset at NICO. I think DJ Shipley and a couple of other guys, we've been fortunate to send guys to NICO where they do a full brain scan, full everything. And you've literally got 13 doctors or 13 practitioners, 8 hours a day looking at one person.
Yeah.
That investment on that person is probably, what it costs a wing of an aircraft, right? And you're going to get a much better person. And then what we talked about, they come back and they believe in the treatment and how they're better. You'll hear a lot of guys, I think you've interviewed, talk about NICO and how it helped them personally. And then the tools that they learn, they've shared it. Like I shared art therapy the other day, right?
Well,
the ability.
I was going to speak about art therapy. I mean, I teased you the other day about why you're up so late, and I realized you were doing art therapy by making guns. So you were actually getting part of your brain regrowing with the art therapy, the creative side, getting those that flow state going on, and that at that time was slightly more important than the sleep side of things, and that creative outlet. I do conundrums and mathematics on a comedy show. Watch that at night. That's how I was going, why is my brain feeling better? Was that just the creativity? It doesn't matter what it is, Erick. You're refurbishing guns. DJ's doing a skateboard. I'm doing maths and anagrams. You do have to work on that part of the brain. I'm just going to touch on, people might have heard about the sleep. I'm going to put my SF veteran hat off and put my nutrition geek hat on. How I got out of the alcohol for sleep and whatever else bad habits you're doing. Again, I went, hey, it happens to everybody else, but I know better. It's not happening to me. How I got out of it was I started taking ketones 2 or 3 times a day, so that changed my anxiety, changes the excitatory neurotransmitter from glutamate to GABA. So I calmed down. You talked a bit about a GABA derivative, but then specifically for sleep, and I took big doses, big doses of GABA, big doses of melatonin for the first week to get me off, big doses of magnesium, big doses of, it'll come to me. There was a cortisol lowering amino acid, big fancy word, but I took those to really get that big impactful thing. And then I got on my Dr. Kirk Parsley. He's got a great formula he invented for the SEALs, a sleep remedy. It's absolutely brilliant, but I'm taking that for 6 weeks straight. But that you need that intervention of something, and as you said, we intervene it with a couple of drinks. That's not going to cut it. But yeah, those are the things I use. If someone's listening, use those things. They're very helpful. I think we've really covered a lot, and I don't want to lose the listener at this stage. So I think we've covered so much. What I'd like to do to tie it off is, where do people go to find out what you do and associate with? I think we chatted about it before with your link tree, but what's the best place for people to get in contact with you, reach out, and or reach out to the support elements that you've got there?
Absolutely. No, and I appreciate that opportunity. So right now I've focused on Instagram. So I think you can definitely search for my name, Erick Miyares, or Echo 9. There's two derivatives of that platform: Echo 9 Axiom and Echo 9 Hopes. And so really quick, the difference in Axiom to Hopes is what I realized, and even with your show and what some of the other guys coming out sort of in a public figure-ish perspective to help folks, is each of them focused on something different. And there was I realized that there was sort of this taboo, which I don't believe in, which is, firearms. If you're looking at stuff out on Instagram, Facebook on firearms, you're going to commit suicide. No, I think once we, I've looked at it kind of from an intelligence perspective and go, how do I yield the greatest reach? And that was naturally by things that I used as therapy, which for firearms, right? I just like the pieces of taking them apart, putting them together, the historical pieces, because we used weapons for 29 years. I'm like, I don't even know how that thing created, who created it. So I like the history of it. And it is my way of cognitively focusing on something else that I didn't have to do for 29 years, right? Even though we had weapons, I get to fix them and make them my own and do the art therapy side of it. So Axiom focuses on, hey, yielding people who like firearms, firearm industry, cloning weapons, and then a little bit about the cool guy photos. But most of my photos that I share have a message. There's a reason I use that as art. Hey, here's me, really bad, or here's me something. So Axiom is that. And then Hopes, what I realized is it's the same content when it comes to the veteran support or law enforcement or their family, but Hopes then doesn't have any of the firearm stuff, right? So I noticed that I have a lot of followers that are mental health professionals or just people who may not want their feeds to have weapon stuff, right? And so both of those are on Instagram and on Facebook. And then if there's anyone that's on LinkedIn, you can contact me on LinkedIn as well. But predominantly right now it's on Instagram. And then I have a link tree. And what I like to do on that link tree, just because it's a much more versatile capability, is, I'll put this podcast, so I'll put resources as I discover them, and I'll just put in there a staple sort of links. And it's in the process, right? So because I don't work for somebody, I haven't signed a contract to anybody, I have a lot more creative left and right limits, and I like that. So I used to be in a nonprofit before with special operations, and this gives me the ability, as people contacting me and they're like, hey, I really like this or I don't like this, I can maneuver. The mission's still the same: stop veteran suicide. I'll use my vulnerabilities as strength, and then it's a movement in process. And so far it's been pretty successful. But that's how you can connect with me, and then it may change into the future and continue to do these sort of talks. But I appreciate the opportunity to share that.
You're very welcome. Look, thank you for coming on. Read the caption. If someone's listening and they're going to your Instagram, read the captions. I love testing people every couple months on that one as well. I'm assuming Echo 9 was one of your call signs back in the day?
No, so Echo 9, it was that was actually a lack of creativity, and it stood for E9, and so it's E9 Sergeant Major. And so when I went on and on of the fence to go onto the internet, first of all. Like my wife and family are like, you hounded us for 20 years that we couldn't post anything on Facebook. And my wife said, you're like a social media, whatever, for lack of a better word. She's like, now you're just all over the internet. And so at the end, I said, why am I doing this? Well, the military spent so much time to make me a leader, right? And so I took that to say, you know what? It's a reminder for me, regardless if you're not in uniform, you've been entrusted to be a leader, continue to lead forward however possible. And so I put just Echo 9, and then a buddy of mine that was a good friend of the two guys that committed suicide, he actually drew that symbol for me. I actually, so the two
Wow.
1911s in there, there's two symbologies behind them really quick. It is, the police for the United States, the freedom to bear arms. And then for the military and the law enforcement, that we've used arms in defense of this nation. The deeper sense is 1911 is for each of those two guys, which constantly reminded me of the why, right? And so even that logo is always interchanging, because I come from a world that if I got to turn that into a unicorn and it attracts the next generation of people,
Yeah,
I will make that a unicorn, because again, the mission's important. It isn't the logo. It isn't the name. I can change that as long as I still get to people. I can adapt, because I don't have any shareholders,
yeah.
right? And I don't make money out of it. So I've removed that compromise in order to just help for the sake of really caring about our veterans and their family and their children and the next generation of people that will defend us.
It's stunning. That reminds me of a friend of mine. He's been a guest on the show, Joe Hortai, and he talks about in the service of others, and that really sums up where you're at. And that, tip of the hat to you, Erick, because you put yourself on the line for so many years in the service of others. We don't do this because we get up and just want to go and shoot and blow stuff up. We do that to save someone else, in the service of others. And that's why you epitomize it there, saying with the logo, you're not tied to things. This is what you're doing. And then you, not only that, you thought about, your axiom, and you got hope, because we need to connect and lead all sorts of people. So really, I think you epitomize that in the service of others and to stop veteran suicide. Look, saying finish a show is never easy. I never know what to say, but I just want to say thank you for your service. I've never said that to anyone before in my life. When I went to America and everybody's saying thank you for your service to me, it's like just what I did. Thank you for your service to others. Thank you for connecting with me and putting the shows out there, and it raised that awareness so much more. I'd really love to have you back in the future, and we delve into things a bit more. And people that are listening, your stuff is absolutely phenomenal. It's inspired me, and it's always down to that one nugget. If one thing we can do can help one other person get out of a bad place, we've done our job. Erick, great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope to see you again soon.
Same here. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you, my friend.